Hey, everybody, welcome back. Hope you're having an amazing day today. I've got the fire on. It's actually gotten a little bit cold where I am, and which is a bit of a change. It was literally 80 degrees, like I think about 2 days ago. So now we got some freezing weather and time to turn on my old fake fire back there. I do have real heat coming from a real fire, but I don't actually have that fired up tonight. Anyway, if you saw the title of tonight's video, you might have thought, well, that's a little bit strange, ambiguous, and why in the world would you be giving us instructions on how to actually ruin a relationship? And I wanted to go about it in a bit of a different way. Part of it is from years of having spoken to friends and people that I know about it, and some of the things that I've witnessed. Some of the things I've seen on podcasts where people have talked about basically advice that without intending to, they're actually going to ruin a relationship with. And it kind of gave me the genesis of this idea. So I thought I'd go ahead and dive right into it. And for those of you that are watching this and thinking, well, Steve, we know that you're against marriage, at least the Western version of it, which is very true. I'm actually completely against involving the government in anything when it comes to your personal relationships and getting officially married in the government's eyes, because it does incentivize the breaking of that contract. And I don't endorse anybody to do that whatsoever. And I also encourage anybody that is looking into getting into a long-term relationship, take a look at the laws in your area. Understand legally what you are facing when you do that, just to make sure that you protect yourselves. At all costs, make sure that you watch what you're doing and protect yourself. One thing I would recommend is going ahead and getting a consultation, even from an attorney, so they can break down to you what you should and shouldn't do to make sure that you are protected in every way, shape, or form. And this is for men and women too. Make sure that you are extremely careful about who you get involved with and what potential dangers could happen. Not just, I'm not talking about, just physical danger, but, financial problems too, because that happens much more often, in my opinion, and you don't want to get tangled up in that. So, for those of you that might say, well, Steve, I'm not looking to get into a relationship, this to some degree will help you break down things that you might even want to work on in your own life. I tend to look at it this way myself. You don't really set your life up to get into a relationship. You set yourself up for success and being the best version of you. And if the right relationship ends up coming along at some point down the road, then that's a great thing. That's an amazing thing. But only if the right thing comes along. And in many cases, especially with today's culture, in many cases that might not even ever happen. You might improve upon yourself and get yourself to a point to where you're probably the best version of yourself that you might ever be, and you still might not ever have the right person come along, and that's completely okay. And it's okay to go into it with that mindset. In fact, that's probably, if anything, the best mindset you can go into this situation with. So, without any further ado, I'm going to break down some of the things that will absolutely help ruin a relationship. And instead of projecting it so much per se on the opposite party that might be coming into your life, or things that might have ruined relationships for you in the past, let's also take a look at it within our own selves and try and figure out, are there any of these things that actually apply to us that we could either improve upon or things that we could remove from our lives? Not just, really not even for a future relationship, but just for our own benefit. So here we go. One of the first big things is unrealistic expectations. And I hear about this a lot. People expecting somebody to be completely fit to the point to where they think you're going to practically live at the gym. How are you going to have time to do all of that? And on top of all of that, have uh, unlimited resources and funds and be particularly successful at business or have a job that has a high amount of income. And on top of all of that, develop yourself on a personal level and make sure that you look your absolute best and that you bring everything to the table that you possibly can. And this is generally more women towards men. Men towards women, I will say this one thing that I have noticed is that men have a little bit more of a, depending on the type of guy you're talking about. If you're talking about a guy who has his life together, has his financial situation somewhat straightened out, is decent looking, in decent shape, and is attempting to try and strive on most levels of life and have some level of success, for those types of guys, they're not really generally looking for a woman who is, say, financially successful. We're not going to be asking you what you do for a living other than under a social circumstance of, hey, we're hanging out together and I want to know more about you. We're generally not really looking for somebody to provide for us. Now, I realize that I did another video recently called Hag Maxing that was literally all about young guys trying to find older women to literally provide for them and basically treat them like a kid and feed them dino nuggies while they play video games. And if that's your thing, I'm not knocking you. I don't personally do that, but that was literally one of the descriptions that I read, that a guy was literally looking for a woman to feed him dino nuggies and take care of him like he was a little kid. And you know, I guess if that's your thing, more power to you. But I mean, to me, it seemed a little bit on the ridiculous side. But anyway, unrealistic expectations is a huge, huge thing. And if you want, when it comes to things that will definitely kill a relationship, that is absolutely a huge thing right there. I've actually encountered before, when I was married before, I actually had a much bigger house, and then I shrank down to the cabin that I ultimately spend most of my time in, and I do film work and work with my business and all sorts of other stuff that I do. And I've had people get upset with me. I actually had one lady get upset with me at one point because she wanted somebody who, uh, she basically wanted the version of me that had the house but had maybe never even been married. So I would have had a huge house without having ever had anybody hardly living in the place with me. Pretty much no baggage, but all of that wide open so that she and the children she had from a previous marriage would potentially have the option to move in should the relationship go anywhere. And that was literally the opening way she treated things when I met her. Needless to say, it didn't go very far, but unrealistic expectations along the lines of, if you don't already have a huge family that would have been living there, why in the world would you be paying for a huge McMansion with all that tons of living space? That's a perfect example of coming into it with an unrealistic expectation that the other person has completely centered their life around just meeting you, when the reality is people are living their lives according to what's best for them. And when I say best for them, you have to realize best for them doesn't include all the toxic bull crap that a lot of people try to justify. And we'll kind of get down into that a little bit if we can, a little bit later here in the video. But one of the big things that people tend to do aside from that is holding on to exes. And when I say holding on to exes, I mean like literally keeping their numbers in your phone, keeping them attached on social media, people that for whatever reason, they didn't make it to your future, and that situation is broken and didn't function for a reason. And you live in this state of perpetual denial where you just can't seem to remove them. And I know that we've all probably encountered people that are hung up on exes and not ready for a relationship, but to some degree, we have to ask ourselves that about our own exes. Now, my personal stance, I don't even keep exes connected to me or around simply because it's better for them to be able to move on and be able to have a relationship if I'm not involved in their life in any way. And also, too, it kind of creates a degree of separation for you to have a clean slate and a fresh start to move on from. And this really isn't even talking about potentially getting into another relationship. It's just about having a clean slate just in your own life. So you don't have somebody, getting upset every time you move on and do something, somebody knocking at your door crying, or somebody even worse, God forbid, drunk texting or drunk calling you at 2 a.m. You don't want that sort of thing hanging around in your life. And it isn't just because of maybe a potential relationship in the future. It's to make sure that you have your own level of of just preserving yourself and having a level of peace, which you can't have if you have somebody that is trapped and stuck and just perpetually caught in your life. And it's left over from a broken relationship that, as I said before, didn't make it to the future for a reason. And you have to accept that. And oftentimes exes, I mean, let's be realistic here. They're not going to be the biggest fans of your future, especially because your future is not going to likely involve them. And let's be realistic, it shouldn't involve them. It didn't make it for a reason. Leave it behind. And you have to ask yourself the hard questions as to why you can't just leave it behind for those of you that still have that connected. And now, obviously, I'm not referring to if you were married, you had children with somebody, and you have to maintain some level of contact so the two of you can exchange your kids or something like that. We're not talking about that. And I think anybody here that's watching this, you can reasonably understand that's clearly not what we're talking about. Now, when you get to a point when your kids get a bit older and there's just, maybe you don't need to be connected anymore, up to you if there's a level of understanding between the two of you for the kids' sake, like when your kids eventually maybe get married, which if you're smart, you'll talk them out of. But at some point down the road, they might be good to do whatever you can to just try to maintain the peace. But generally, in my opinion, the best way to maintain it is to not have involvement. You don't want to be chatty with it. And if let's just consider the possibility that if you ever move forward into a relationship where something comes along, like I said, and you're already working on being the best version of yourself, and a relationship comes along that suits you and works out well, the last thing you really want to be doing is having your ex involved, because they're going to want to know about that. They're going to want to know about that relationship, especially if you're a guy and you're dealing with an ex-girlfriend, an ex-wife. They're going to stick their nose in that, and they're going to get involved in ways that are do nothing but sabotage that relationship right from the get-go. My personal opinion, you guys can give me your thoughts and feedback on that, what your experiences has been with that. But from everything I've ever seen from anybody that's ever done that, and including myself, like I mean, those of you that know my original horror story that I posted about a month ago, obviously my ex isn't involved. She's completely blocked and removed from my life, just so I can have some peace and some sanity. So why don't we go on to one more thing, and that is acting single, which it's the funniest thing in the world. I've seen so many people try to defend this online. It's the strangest thing. Like, whenever the table gets flipped onto them, they never ever want to consider the possibility of somebody doing this sort of thing back to them. And I've covered this in other videos before, and acting single, it kind of touches on the edge of, say, cheating. But we're not going to really go into the cheating stuff because that's kind of on the nose. We all know that if you cheat, that's a great way to ruin a relationship. I don't really have to state that, but acting single is a good way to lead to cheating. Major things with that is keeping around single friends that want you to go out and basically pretend like you're not in a relationship anymore. And I mean, ladies in particular, let me just explain something. And you might be like, oh boy, here he comes the mansplaining. But, I'm going to fire away anyway and just tell you, when a guy sees you come into a club with a group of your friends, you're pretty much, for all intents and purposes, single. Everybody there looks at you as if you're single. They don't care that you're married. They don't care that you're in a relationship. They just don't. You know that when you walk in there, to a certain degree, it's going to kind of give off that vibe that you are, in fact, single, ready to get involved in stuff. And if you're dancing and drinking and bumping and grinding and doing basically what dancing is these days, which is everybody's grinding all over each other like it's a simulated sex act. I mean, that's pretty much what you do when you go to a club. So let's just cut to the chase and tell the truth. And if you do that, ultimately what you're going to get is you're probably going to end up pretty much sleeping around. That's just what I mean. And we all know that. So, I mean, to some degrees, it can be refreshing to just tell the truth and put it out there like it is, because that's what's going to ultimately happen. Now, I'm not here to knock if you decide that you want to live that sort of lifestyle. I mean, we talk about that to some degree. That's really diving into the hookup culture. I mean, for my money, we can go ahead and say, yeah, it's absolutely, you're totally engaging in hookup culture. People attempting to find a way to balance that and take that into a relationship is a guaranteed way to ruin it. And I'm just amazed sometimes when I see, and there are guys that do this too. There are guys that do this too, where they will justify putting themselves in situations where they know they are likely to cheat. They know they're likely to get tangled up and involved with somebody that they shouldn't be involved with. And then they sit there and they pull the whole, I'm so shocked that that happened, as if they didn't know and everybody else didn't know that that was going to lead to what it led to. So a lot of this really kind of comes down to personal honesty. I mean, like, how honest are we willing to be with ourselves about these situations and deal with them so we don't end up in a situation where we end up doing things that we say we don't want to do, and we end up doing things we say we don't emulate and we don't want to support. How do we become the best version of ourselves? And like I said at the beginning of the video, this is not about becoming the best version of yourself for the sake of a potential future relationship. This is about becoming the best version of yourself so that it's a legitimate change, so that it's something that is a legitimate reflection of who you are, and somebody that is aspiring to become a better version of you. And part of that just comes from a level of self-reflection and honesty. And beyond all of that, if you do those things, you will set yourself up for a position that if, and I can't stress this enough, if something good comes along, you might have the opportunity to be able to partake in something great. If. Now, I know there's a lot of people are going to say, Steve, you should absolutely say that there's never any chance that anything good will ever come along ever. And I realize, statistically speaking, our society and our culture are pretty much screwed. And it's not particularly likely that you're going to run into somebody that isn't completely hung up on hookup culture. Guy or girl, doesn't matter who's watching this, it's going to be hard to find that. And it really, really depends on where you look. And even this day and age, where you look is really kind of a crapshoot, because everybody's got social media. Everybody's getting inundated with the hedonistic hookup culture that encourages you to be dishonest in relationships and screw around. So it's going to be a really, really hard sell to find somebody that you might actually want to have a relationship with that isn't going to potentially really upend your life. And the good thing about being aware about some of these things that we're talking about here is when you have honest self reflection about whether or not any of this is in our lives and whether or not it's affecting us, and facing the things that we probably should cut out and the things that we probably should remove, when you have a good amount of self reflection about that, you can tend to spot really toxic and poisonous situations when they do come down the pike. So there'll probably be a lot of potential relationships that come at you that you realize, that's definitely something I don't want to be in. And the best way to be aware of it is to be thinking about what a good relationship is, identifying the toxic traits in advance. So when you see them coming, you don't sit there and start to wonder, well, that's a red flag, but gee, I wonder how red that red flag is going to get. You have to be prepared to just slam that door. And I'm not talking in the sense of an unrealistic expectation. I mean, like, for most of us, if you start to put down a list of realistic expectations, you begin to realize, okay, somebody who's honest, who's straightforward, who doesn't engage in hookup culture, if you're going to do a long term relationship, obviously, there has to be a level of really deep trust. And that might be extremely hard to come by these days. And I realize that that will actually disqualify most people. So, all I can say to that is ultimately good luck out there. It's extremely unlikely you're going to find many people, and you might be like, wow, that's completely hopeless. But the good hope in this message that I'm giving tonight is we can better ourselves and get ourselves to a point to where we have a level of personal happiness and personal fulfillment, to where if a good relationship potentially comes along, we can enjoy that. And if nothing ever comes along, or we see a lot of fake stuff come along, we can shut those things down and maybe still be able to preserve our personal peace and not have it upend us. So pretty much with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end it tonight. And as always, leave your comments underneath. I want to know your thoughts on this, maybe your experiences, things that you might think about what I said. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Add to it. I want to hear what you have to think. Yeah, I have to say, and what you think about it. So, and also, of course, like and subscribe if you feel like it, because I absolutely intend to make more videos coming up down the road. And make sure you hit the notification bell too, because I do hear from people. They're like, oh, if you ever do a live, how will I see it? And I'm like, I think you got to hit the notification bell for that. And I'm actually considering doing some live streams coming up, because I think it might be fun and a little bit interesting to do, and get some interaction going. So With all that being said, I hope you guys have a great night, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon.